Welcome. We're joined by Baroness Cox, a member of the House of Lords since 1982 and the founder of the Humanitarian Aid Relief Trust. Baroness Cox, thank you very much for your time.
Well, it's a privilege to be with you. As you know, I've just visited Artsakh and Armenia and have come back just full of grief, a heavy, heavy heart, but a passion to try to do what we can to get the truth known and to get some justice for your people.
Well, as you mentioned, you were in Artsakh and Armenia, and there was a lot of talk about that. Why did you decide to come to Armenia and Artsakh?
Well, I think it's very, very important to be with people in the difficult and tragic times. Anyone can come when things are fine, but it's important to be with people in their suffering and also to be able to come back and tell the world the reality, to be able to say, I've been, I've seen, this is how it really is. And that's a very powerful way of trying to get the truth known. And I'm told when I speak in the House of Lords that members of Parliament do listen because they know that I've been there. I'm not just reading a report. And we speak, therefore, the authenticity of first-hand experience. And what a tragic experience it's been.
And can you speak a bit about your time in Artsakh? Where did you go and what were you doing while you were there?
Yes, we went first to Dadivank, which of course is in Kobodra, but we met Father Johannes there, and it's heartbreaking because the place was full of people lighting their candles because maybe it's going to be the last time they can do that. We saw a wedding being performed, which again was heartbreaking because it's probably the last wedding to be carried out there, at least for the foreseeable future. But we also asked Father Johannes what he felt. Did he have any support from the international Christian community? And I'll never forget his words. He said, no, nothing. I am all alone. And I will certainly challenge the Anglican Church now because the Anglican Church is in communion with the Armenian Orthodox Church. And I think there should be much more support. So that's one of the follow-ups I will be doing. And we also went to Stepanakert. I'm glad we were able to make it to Stepanakert. When we were there, we met the excellent and really inspirational Human Rights Ombudsman for Artsakh, and also the Ombudsman for Armenia came with us as well. So we had a briefing on the tragedies that have afflicted the people in Stepanakert and in Artsakh, and the evidence was given of things like, you all know, the use of illegal weapons by Azerbaijan, the Turkey's importation of the Syrian jihadists, and the beheadings, and we saw the deliberate targeting of the maternity hospital. We visited the ruins there. We said these are war crimes, to attack places like hospitals. We saw the destroyed electricity power station, which again is brutal because that stops people having electricity, power and light. We saw other examples of the attacks on Stepanakert, the music school, and we had the opportunity to meet the president, and that was a privilege. And it was very important to be able to hear his perspective on the situation. So it was a very, very moving visit. And on the way back, I took photographs of people burning their own homes because they didn't want to leave them for the Azeris. And that is heartbreaking. You see people with all their belongings just going up in flames. I mean, it was an opportunity to see a real tragedy and a real genocide.
I also wanted to ask about cultural heritage sites. This morning, there's been news going around that the Gananch church in Shushi has also had its domes blown off. You have spoken about how this conflict was in a way a civilizational front, and we are seeing now Christian churches being desecrated and damaged. I'm wondering what you think about this when you see these images and videos of places like Dadivank and Gananch.
Well, it's just absolutely heartbreaking. As we know, Armenia was the first nation to become Christian. It's got some of the oldest churches in the world, and particularly with Armenia and in Artsakh. But of course, they're vulnerable now. When we were at Dadivank, they were removing some of the 800-year-old hatch cars in case Azerbaijan smashed those up. But it is the brutality, the inhumanity, the hatred and the hate speech. We have seen a lot of evidence of the hate speech being taught even in schools in Azerbaijan. And that, of course, fuels the aggression and fuels the brutality. So I think it's immensely serious. We're writing about it. And if anyone could send us some information on what's happening to the holy places in Artsakh, we will put that in our reports.
And finally, I want to ask what your message would be right now to Armenians, not just in Armenia and Artsakh, but around the world that feel defeated and humiliated by this war.
Well, my heart goes out to them. I assure them that they're in my heart, my prayers, my love for them is, well, just growing as they suffer more. But one little ray of light, I think, is the spirit of Armenia, that even in the middle of this horrific tragedy, you cannot kill the spirit of Armenia. Just two brief examples. One, we visited some refugees in church buildings in Armenia, and they had come from Artsakh, and of course they'd lost everything, and some of them lost loved ones. I mean, it was a horrendous situation. But in the middle of all that, a 12-year-old boy sat down and played the piano beautifully. So there's still music even in the anguish. And the other amazing story was my colleague, Father David Thomas, an Anglican priest, was with me. And when we were at Dadivank, we took photographs of like the hatch cars and everything else. And David was talking to a group of Armenians, and they said they wanted a photograph. And they took the photograph and they said to my colleague David, "Were you smiling?" And he said, "Well, no, I wasn't smiling." And they said, "Well, you've got to smile. We have to be happy in the house of God." And how they smiled in the middle of that tragedy just shows the spirit of Armenia is still strong and will not be overcome.
And one last thing, on Twitter, a photo has been circulated of yourself in Karabakh in the 90s, handing out sweets to children. Do you remember that moment? Can you speak on that very quickly?
I do indeed. Well, I had the poignant, painful privilege of being in Artsakh during that war in the early 1990s. And of course, there were 400 grad a day pounding in from Shushi to Stepanakert. People were in basements and cellars. And it was a great privilege to be with them. And we did on that time have the opportunity to take sweets. And we also were able to arrange for Christmas presents to be sent to those children at that time. And they still remember it to this day, which is why it's so important to be with people in the days of tragedy. And to show one's love.
Indeed.
And just to show one's love, yeah.
Indeed. And we really appreciate all the work you do. Thank you very much, Baroness.
Well, I say, as I always say, we just say thank you to you Armenian people. Okay, you're having a horrendous time, but you have been holding that front line of faith and freedom for the rest of us. And I was amazed for how long your valiant soldiers held that front line against the phenomenal use by Azerbaijan of, supplied also by Turkey, of weapons, including illegal weapons like smirch and cluster bombs and drones coming over. And your people held that front line for so long. And I have nothing but admiration as well as pain.
Well, thank you very much, Baroness. And thank you for joining us on CivilNet.